Welcome to the December 7th NADA Community Connection Hour entitled Peer Providers in the Five Needle Protocol, Changing the Dominant Paradigm. Good evening. I am Victoria Taylor. I am an AccuDetox specialist and registered trainer from Southwest Virginia, and I have volunteered to coordinate the Community Connection Hour for our organization. And tonight we'll be talking about peer providers of the protocol. Unfortunately, several of my scheduled guests, as well as my tech support, were unable to be here this evening due to family and medical emergencies. So please be patient with me as I host the conversation, and we will probably have time and opportunity for you to share your experiences as well. Most of the hour we will be hearing from our guests. Please stay muted unless otherwise indicated. And you can ask a question, you can always ask a question or make a comment by dropping it in the chat. Please remember that this is a content-based enrichment program and not a NADA membership or business meeting. I'm now going to share our NADA mission statement. And Kat Herrera is going to read our vision and mission statement for us. I'm going to put it on the screen just a second. Thank you. All right. All right, Kat.
Okay. So our mission and vision statement: the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association trains people in the NADA protocol and ear acupressure and acupuncture protocol for trauma, substance misuse, abuse, mental health, and behavioral health. Together, we promote and advocate for access to holistic health as a right for all communities.
And the vision?
It's on the lower next page, I believe.
No, it's on the same slide. You probably just have something covering it. I'll read it. The vision, we envision a world where healthcare is people-centered, holistic, and accessible to the most vulnerable and underserved in our communities. And these are our principles. The spirit of NADA. All beings have a right to self-determination, the capacity to transform, and be a part of transforming society. NADA changes the dominant paradigm. Simplicity. The NADA protocol is easy to learn and to teach. Trust. We trust that people are capable of learning and that everyone has the capacity to heal themselves. Person-centered. NADA is a nonverbal protocol that meets people where they are. Sharing the protocol bridges cultural divides. Accessible and barrier-free. Historically, and in the present day, there are many barriers to healthcare. Racism, casteism, and all isms are healthcare matters. We work to make sure the NADA protocol is barrier-free and available to all. We believe everyone should have access to receive and to learn the NADA protocol. Compassion. We bring an intention of healing to everyone with whom we share the NADA protocol. Community. Healing and recovery happens in community, and the NADA protocol is easily incorporated into diverse settings. We come together across disciplines to promote an integrated approach to healthcare. The recovery movement in the United States has had a very varied history. Addiction and behavioral health at one time or another have been considered crimes, signs of demonic possession, contributed to a moral failing, or an unresolved social problem, a familial failing, maybe due to congenital disease, or maybe it's a contagious disease, or an incurable disease, or maybe it was due to a neurochemical imbalance. Presently, those of us working in the field understand that the etiology of addiction and behavioral health challenges are complex and varied, and that a number of diverse treatment strategies must be available to address the unique concerns of our patients, clients, and consumers. No group of people understand this better than peers. Peers are individuals with lived experience of mental health challenges. The peer recovery movement is a movement which empowers such individuals to encourage each other to develop skills for living well, building hope, resilience, and connection with one another. The AA and NA fellowships are part of this movement, as are crisis lines and drop-in centers. More recently, behavioral health service boards and other professional organizations have begun to integrate peer work into their offerings. Credentialing, such as the licensed peer support specialist, are now being offered and recognized by financial, legal, and professional entities. For those of you not familiar with the contemporary peer recovery movement, I'm going to post in the chat a link to an article. Let me put it in here. Yeah, okay. To a resource from the Department of Behavioral Health in Virginia, which is my home state. When acupuncture was first introduced at Lincoln, it is my understanding that the services were initially provided by acupuncturists, trained acupuncturists. But as the 5-needle ear protocol was developed, those visionary professionals realized that this technique was easy to learn and simple to provide, and began offering training to any member of the collective wanting to serve in this way. Now, while all states do not legally recognize peers as legal providers, this premise remains an essential premise of our organization. So this evening, we have several peer support specialists and activists in peer programs with us to share their experiences. First, I would like to introduce Kat Hereda from Rocky Mount, Virginia. That's Kat, say hello. And Kat works for Piedmont Community Services as a peer recovery specialist. All right, I had invited Tara Moreno from Lake Fenton, Michigan. Tara, are you on the call? Are you here this evening? I didn't see you check in, but okay. We had also expected Rita Cordova Patron from New York City. Rita was unable to make it due to a medical emergency. However, I do have some slides that I'm going to share with you later, showing the variety of programs that she has sourced in their program. Okay, well, welcome. So I would like to know, since my speakers are not here, who on the call, you could put your hand up, is a peer recovery specialist working with AccuDetox? All right, it's you, Kat. So Kat,
Right.
What?
I said, that's okay by me.
Okay, so I think that it's really important for our listeners to understand the holistic nature of peer support. So could you talk a little bit, Kat, about how peer support services are kind of wraparound and
Yeah, absolutely. So like Victoria said, my name is Kat Adedia, and I am a registered peer recovery specialist. I'm someone in long-term recovery for about 14 and a half years now. And what I do is I am a community recovery coordinator, which means I do a lot of different things, but the essence of it is, you know, as a peer in recovery, we believe that there's multiple pathways to recovery. There's no one correct door to it. So some people find recovery through spirituality. Some people find it through cognitive therapeutic skills. Some people find it through fellowshipping, various ways. And so the great thing about peer support is there's no wrong door. right? There's no wrong pathway to recovery. Whatever pathway it's gonna take to get you to the point where you're able to live the life that you wanna feel is fulfilling for you, then we're all about helping to make that happen and supportive. And whatever that looks like. So that could be helping people, again, find a spiritual pathway, finding a holistic pathway through improving physical health, which we know a lot of our people have comorbidity, a lot of physical health issues, housing, employment support. A lot of what we're doing at my agency is focusing on getting some of those basic needs taken care of so that we can move on to the next kind of phase of wellness for individuals. So a lot of that revolves around transportation and medical needs and housing and those kind of things. But there's really, peer support is so multifaceted that it would be impossible for us to really even wrap that up in one session, I feel like. I hope that.
No, that's great. I think this might be a good time to share Rita's slides that just
Yeah.
show the variety of the programs at her facility.
Yeah.
Let me do that. So you can get an idea of the variety of programs that are available. So let me enter full screen, sorry. So these are some slides that Rita Cordova Padron, who's an ADS and peer support specialist, and she works in New York City. She is from Puerto Rico and she works with Salud y Acupuntura para el Pueblo, who was our featured guest last week and so last month. So some of you might have met her, but this is more specifically about her peer work. So you can see they do work to acknowledge our ancestors. They do voices in wellness, trying to appeal to a wide variety of audiences, including people who live in shelters, people who come from home, trying to keep it access. This is a hands-on workshop that she shared that was at a church, the Healing Space at a church. And you can see that she coordinates these variety of programs. Wellness Wednesday, a walk-in healing clinic, a movie night. Here's one specifically for women and girls that was in March and has HIV awareness, as well as AccuDetox, relaxation, stress results. They wrap around services. Here's one against violence against women. And you can see they do HIV testing, reproductive health, maternal and child health, ear acupuncture, acupressure, aromatherapy, safe sex kits, and provide community resources. So I just wanted to share that at that point so that we could get a sense of a program in action. All right, in our organization, so I have a question, Kat. When you were in recovery, did you have access to peer services? How are the services you provide similar or different to the ones you experienced during your recovery?
That's a really good question. So when I first got into recovery back in 2008, I was introduced to peer support, but I didn't know what it was, right? So I walked into a drop-in center and they said, hey, we have these people who are peer supports. And I didn't really know what that meant. And what they were there to do at that time is they were navigating me through the process of like an assessment and how to get connected to things, which was really, I look back on that and I'm so grateful for the help that they provided, because it was really confusing navigating a system of care that I did not know, I didn't have any understanding of, right? I didn't know what you needed to get assessments done. I had never thought about being on food stamps or Medicaid. Like I had never thought of myself as being someone who needed those things. So to have a peer support specialist there to like teach me how to navigate through that was really helpful. And beyond that, I think, this was back in 2008. So I feel like they were really getting to a point of exploring how much more peer supports could do at that time too, and in that specific area. And so, yeah, like there were things that they offered to me that I didn't even understand what the meanings were. And so a lot of the time I didn't take advantage of it. Right. One thing that they did do is they said, hey, would you like to try acupuncture? And I was like, no. And that was, that was probably about 13 years ago when they offered that to me. And I finally did say yes to that. And so it's kind of funny looking back now that I'm in the field, and I'm able to offer that. It's kind of full circle. But anyways, yeah, the services are a little bit different now in that I feel we've realized that every person is individual. There's what I do for one person is not going to be the same set of circumstances for the next. How I work with or treat or address someone isn't the same for the next. I think we've learned that you don't just put people into like groups, right? Like here's a large group room and you all get the same content from it. I think peer supports, we have such a big variety, much like you showed from the slides for the other provider that you just showed. There's such a variety of things, right? You showed a domestic violence slide, a holistic slide. You showed all these things. I think that we're realizing that there's such a variety of approaches and things that we can address and focus on. And so I really think that that's some things that have changed over the years.
So in our organization, we always talk about changing the dominant paradigm. And during my lifetime, medical care is most often provided by what we call the white coats, right? The trained and licensed professionals. And our culture believes that this protects the consumer. And that's a really important reason for the development of departments of professional regulation, licensing, certification. But it also limits access to services. So in your program, have you confronted pushback because you use lay providers? Do people say, oh, I only want to see, you're not, I know you are licensed, but you're not educated, or how do you navigate that?
I would say the only question that I really get is if it's someone new that is being offered the NADA protocol, oftentimes I'll get like, wait a minute, have you ever done that? How do you know how to do this? And how long have you been doing this? And did you ever receive it? And really, those are the only pushbacks that I get. And usually when right off the bat, I'll say, look, I received this 13 years, about 13, 14 years ago myself, and I was hesitant. I share that experience and how that helped me, and just kind of throw that out as like, this could potentially help you as well, but if not, that's fine. And right away, I think people loosen up like, oh, okay, so she's someone who was also like me in addiction and was struggling with it. So I think that breaks down the wall a little bit immediately. The next question I get typically is, well, how many people do you do this to? And like, how long have you been doing it? And once I tell them, I provide the treatment to anywhere from 1 to 15, 20 people a week, then it kind of relaxes them like, okay, you have some credibility of, what you're doing. After that, I don't think there's any hesitancy around the fact that I'm not a doctor or that lab coat, that white coat. I think it's actually more of a casual approach of like, okay, I'm comfortable with her. She gets what it's like. She sees that I'm anxious and she knows what that feels like. So I don't feel a lot of pushback from people giving me that kind of white lab coat hesitancy.
Well, what about the other staff? What about the other staff at the agency? Just because, your department, I've visited, you have a whole room, you have lots of resources. Is there like any problems with the staff? Not necessarily even the AccuDetox, just your whole program.
I would say, in the sense of being transparent, I will say when I first came here 4 years ago to this particular program, 4 years ago, people would mention peer support, peer recovery specialist, and that kind of like hushed tone of like, they used to be a client here. And it was almost like you had to whisper it. You couldn't, and I was like, there's no shame in it though. Like that's the whole point of being a peer recovery specialist, is that you have that lived experience. And that is what makes us champions, right? Like I'm proud of that. You don't have to hush it and whisper it and say, oh, but that's Kat. She's an addict as well.
Addict, right?
Right. And so when I first came here, there was only one peer recovery specialist at this site, the one that you visited, Victoria. So now you come and you see a site where there's 10 or 11 of us easily in this one location. But 4 years ago, there was one. And I was the second one, and they didn't know I was peer support certified. They hired me in a different position. So it was that hushed of like, oh, that's the staff who's a peer. I think that we're past that now, that 4 years ago we weren't, but I think today we're past that. And there was that hesitancy of, is this something a peer can really do? What are they really capable of? What are their limitations or abilities? I feel like we've really gotten past that though now, and the staff that we have today is very much on board with like fully vested in the thought of peer support and peer recovery specialists.
So right now in Virginia, we license peer specialists, right?
We register them, we
Register.
certify, you go through a state certification and then a registration process.
So do you think that's essential, or is that just another way to perpetuate classism and racism in?
I actually like it, and I'll tell you why. I feel that it adds legitimacy, just like you would to like a therapist or a doctor, right? You go and they have the plaque on the wall. Does it mean that that means that they're a great doctor? No, it just means that they have the basic knowledge and abilities. Now, how they treat people and how they go about the rest of their practice probably makes them a good or bad doctor or therapist, right? So for me, my credential shows me, it gives me a level of legitimacy, and then how I treat and serve people adds to that and makes me either a good or bad peer recovery specialist. So to me, it legitimizes that, and it puts us on another level of saying, hey, we went through screening processes. It's not just that I'm someone who is a drug addict, it's I'm someone in recovery who's because I'm a drug addict, right? But I'm someone in recovery. So I took the steps to like work through my own stuff, be in a good place. I went to classes, I dedicated hours of my life. And not only that, I went through a certification process to make sure that I, could be employable, and I did all these things. And so I understand like hesitancy about like classism or socialism, like that concern. But at the same time, a lot of what's being available right now is these classes. I'm now a trainer. I train in Virginia. I'm also certified to train in Arizona, and my classes are free. Many trainers train and charge anywhere from $300 to $800 a class. I don't, and there's several trainers who don't. And then even for applying for your certification, there's $175, but there's scholarships for that. So there's ways around it to make it so that it's not, it lowers the barriers. It lowers the barriers for people who are not economically prepared to be able to like go take a college course, right?
Thank you. Thank you for addressing that. So I know earlier you mentioned about using the 5-needle protocol in your peer services, and the fact that you received it in your recovery really helps make it more accessible to your clients. Is there, and you have a number of peer specialists at your agency providing the 5-needle protocol, correct? Do you notice, are your clients have more affinity for you, or for, I know you also have some professionals, or there's no distinction?
I feel like that's a really good question. I don't think that for my site here, it's mostly peer recovery specialists who provide the protocol. At the other site is where we have the therapist, licensed therapist. And I don't know that I see a difference necessarily, because I don't oftentimes do the sessions with her specifically. I will say I'm just always very surprised with how quickly people are like, once I share, I've done this before, I was a recipient of this 13 years ago, it immediately usually breaks a wall down of like, oh, okay. And after that, I really don't have to like legitimize myself any more past that. But I don't know that there's much of a difference between myself and the licensed clinicians that are doing their treatments. I couldn't tell you.
The training for the for becoming an ADS, you felt that was accessible to all your peers? There were a lot of peers in your class, I remember.
Yeah, the majority of us, I think you came through 11, was probably 11 of us. And I want to say the majority of those were peers. We had maybe 4 that were licensed, therapists or LCSWs, whatever. They were licensed in some other form or capacity. But the remainder, so about 7 of us, were peer recovery specialists. And I do feel like it was very accessible. Cost-wise, very accessible. Ease of getting the training in our area, which is very rural for anyone who's on this call who doesn't know where Rocky Mount, Virginia is. It's a town of 5,000 people. So we are definitely an underserved population, an underserved community. So I think it was absolutely accessible for us. Thank you, Victoria.
And all the peers are still doing it, and they're still working their recovery, right?
All of our peers are still in, the peer recovery specialists are all still in recovery. They're all still providing, with the exception of one individual, but yeah, they're all providing services and treatments.
That's great.
Mhm.
And so do you have any suggestions or recommendations how we can continue to make services and training accessible and affordable to all community members?
Asking from like a side of NADA
Yeah.
or like as a side of a provider of the like detox protocol myself.
Well, either, both.
Yeah. I think continuing to even know that this is available to the smaller communities like us in Southwest Virginia. This is not something that it's a bit of an old school mentality here sometimes, and this is something that it was looked at as it's holistic, it's new, it's outside the box, and so there's some hesitancy around that. I think that coming here and having the training here in-house versus sending us off to go like to training somewhere else, it really brought it home and made it accessible to us and created more buy-in, which was great. So I think that that's a positive. I think that the staff that we have being willing to go to these odd sites and meet people where they're at in locations that otherwise, you wouldn't do therapy somewhere at a certain center, but I can do the AccuDetox, or I can put beads and seeds on your ears just about anywhere. And I think that that makes it really accessible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kat, for answering those questions and answering them so honestly and from your own experience. I really appreciate it. For those of you who joined the call late, due to illness, we had 4 speakers lined up and only 1 was available this evening. So thus far, the program is a little bit short, but I would like to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions or comments, specifically about using peer support specialists and training peers to provide the AccuDetox protocol.
Paul Silcox.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I 2 questions actually. One is that when you were the lady that was speaking there, and I'm getting old enough to where that unless the name's right in front of me, I forget it. Kat, when you were first introduced to peer recovery services, as you first started in your recovery process, and you were like, you said, what the heck is that? If there had been another sentence added to that, basically saying something to the effect of, these are people that have been in the same position you're in right now, and they've got the experience to help you through that. Would that have helped in understanding that process or accepting it a little quicker? Number one, and then number 2 is basically in providing these services now in other different regions in Virginia. Are these services that are provided under some type of an insurance umbrella? Is it an estate Medicaid type program or not? And I was just, wondering, those particular questions.
I will say that to address your first question, when I was first told to go to the center, it was a peer center, and I was given a piece of paper, and it was, you're going to meet with a peer recovery specialist. That was not helpful. I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue. But when I got to the center and someone introduced themselves as a peer recovery specialist, I was like, look, I really don't know what that is. And then she said, hey, I used to be just like you. And I looked at her and I said, there's no way. I just got out of jail yesterday. There's no way you were like me. Because she looked very professional, and I thought there's no way. Mm-hmm. And she absolutely said, no, 2.5 years ago, I was involved, blah, blah, blah. And she continued. And that was helpful to me. Okay. But if just being given a referral on a piece of paper that said you're going to a peer recovery center, I had no clue. That was not helpful. I didn't know what that language meant. And then for the second piece of asking about like Medicaid, I'll tell you, for us, I come again from like Arizona, where we were billing Medicaid for a variety of services. Here in Virginia, peer billing, I'm actually working on that program now with DMAS, and I'm about to start implementing our peer billing here. And I don't know 100%
you tell them what DMAS is? Some people might not know what DMAS is.
Yeah, sorry, Department of Medical, it's the Medicaid coverage insurance. So they're the people who say whether or not we can bill Medicaid, and I'm working on that. But regardless, I'm not going to be doing billing for AccuDetox. I'll be doing no charge for that service for that time frame. So I don't see that as being a barrier. That's a no service, or I'm sorry, that's a no charge service that I can do, and I can document my peer recovery time in a billable session later on, separate from that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
I would
Paul.
hope, and Victoria, that's a good question for you. Is that what you're finding other peer support specialists are doing? Are they billing separately for time and not doing no charge notes for the services?
I don't know. I don't
Oh,
have an
okay.
answer to that question. I know that many peer support services don't charge. I know
Mhm.
here at New River Valley Community Services in our peer support center, we do drop in. It's not
Mhm.
billable. It's not even recorded unless they need that for parole, probation and parole. So, yeah.
I will say, regardless of if someone has active Medicaid or private insurance or nothing at all, it wouldn't stop us from providing the service. It would be a no charge service, and we would still provide the NADA protocol.
Another speaker that was unable to come tonight, Tara Moreno, who is the founder of Serenity House in Flint, Michigan. She does many of her services as donation based, and they also get a lot of grants because they're a nonprofit.
Right. Some of our funding for the supplies for our NADA and AccuDetox services were provided through some state opioid response funds. Some of those SOAR funds were able to counteract some of that cost.
Cool.
All right. Anybody else have a question?
If there's no other questions, I do have a third.
Please, Paul.
Okay, well, and basically, you know my history a little bit there, and I am I'm about halfway through approval for a nonprofit. I do have approval from the state. I do have my EIN, and I'm working with an attorney and an accountant to send off our application to the IRS. But I am trying to hold this out to the community as being available.
This, you mean
I'm-
detox?
Correct. I'm just reluctant to use the word free only because I'm only a one-person show, and I don't know if I would, my assumption is I would be overwhelmed. But if I don't use the word free, nobody comes in the door, and so it's like, I'm wondering how a recommended way to introduce this into the community. And I've been talking about it for years.
Well,
but-
Paul, it's interesting because, excuse me, I know I interrupted you,
Mhm.
but you're a doctor. You're a doctor of chiropractic.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different expectation than a peer support, right?
Yeah.
So, so already the dynamic is different, and which is the whole point of tonight's conversation. What's the different dynamic? And I know we have some licensed acupuncturists on the call and some LPCs that I'm familiar with. So those of us that are licensed as a doctor or a doctor of chiropractic or a OMD, we have a different dynamic. And there's an expectation already that we are going to get paid and that we get paid a lot. And there's an expectation with peers that maybe they don't need to get paid, which is really, I don't think that's so great either, right? Because they need to make money too. So we do walk a fine line. And I know, for example, Dr. Ranieri, you do a lot of work in the community. Maybe you could put 2 cents in about this conversation.
Well, I'm not a doctor because when I got licensed in 1984, the OMD did not exist.
Mm.
I haven't really seen the point of spending $100,000 to get a piece of paper. I do a lot of international work, and I used to have free community clinics. Usually, and I was just talking to someone today that works in the health care setting because I'm getting motivated to do NADA. And she said, well, if you say by donation, then you don't have to pay for a room at the clinic, donation only. I used to say free when people would put money in a bucket. It's not that I need the money, but I think people, when they donate, they feel like they're receiving. They get, even if it's $1, when I worked in Honduras, people would walk miles to come and receive the NADA protocol. They had nothing to eat, but they heard about the treatment. If they could afford a bag of oranges, they would bring a bag of oranges.
Right.
And that was their way of contributing. How could we have said, and they didn't have money for a bag of oranges for their family, but that was their way of giving back for receiving services. And also privately, my client base, I have a sliding scale, and I find the ones that drive up in a brand new Subaru pay the minimum because I don't ask them how much money you make. And the ones that are driving an old jalopy, Toyota Corolla, they're like, is this enough for you?
Right.
And then some of them I say, don't, just give me the minimum. Just give me, you can't afford to give me more than the minimum. Give me the minimum. So resources and titles and need, they're interesting questions, especially when I've worked around the world with poorest populations, especially in Haiti. And I believe, and I've always said this for 30 years, that acupuncture should be free. That it should be part of a free healthcare system that we give to people, regardless of our training, regardless of I'm an OMD, but maybe all medical services should be free.
Probably. Right. That's an interesting point of view. So did that give you some things to chew on, Dr. Silcox?
Yes, I had been toying around with the back in the 40 years ago in chiropractic, they called it like a box on the wall, and but something along those lines of saying, look, I'm not going to set a fee. You have to determine how valuable this is to you, and I would suggest that if you want to put something in, you do it to where you feel good and you can sleep at night. But I'm not going to fret over it. I'm here to give a service. I'm here to try to help get your life back to where you can live your life again. And
it's interesting that some of the pushback in different states as we do advocacy has been from licensed acupuncturists not wanting NADA to train lay people, peers, mental health professionals. And I assert that it comes from a scarcity mentality, that they are scared. And what usually plays out if you have a well-run program is it actually boosts the practice of the acupuncturist down the road because people want more, right? They discover that the AcuDetox and the 5-needle protocol creates openings. And so then they want to receive acupuncture, body acupuncture, and they're really not the same. They're similar, but they're not the same.
I used to have a fantasy years ago that I would just have a box at the door or like a private slot where you would just put in money, no check, because then I could identify how much you gave. Because I do judge my clients based on that. I do judge them, how much they give me and then I give them less of a treatment, but not I do, some part of me gives them less, but NADA is so leveling for everyone. It's the same treatment in the room for everyone.
Right.
And I've been in community acupuncture clinics where some people get more needles, or Dr. Tan, it's like, oh, I want that too. And why did they get that? But NADA is so leveling. And it does creates community just in that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Julia. Does anybody else want to talk about their experience either with fee for service or with peers providing the service and leveling the playing field. Francine, did you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I just don't know really actually what to say because in Chicago, besides it being not legal, and then because like way back when I first got into NADA, like way back 20 years ago, myself and the two people I was with, we were in the hospitals and we introduced the protocol to several hospitals, but through the substance abuse units. And we were able to do the treatment. Well, we had contracts at that time, so they paid us to do the treatment. And then in the interim, the doctor that was in charge of the unit got trained, and then she took part in the giving the treatment. But that's how the payment came about. Then we moved into the penal system with the Cook County jail system, and we wound up working with the young boys and then the women and the men, the inmates, the true inmates. Then we had a contract there, so we always were paid. But when you go, then we actually were able to actually train people that weren't in a medical field for a minute, and then it just all stopped because the full body people started complaining about that. But at first, like the peer recovery specialist person you have, that was a person that, same person, just a different name, that used to use drugs, got into recovery, became sometimes a counselor, and then got trained to do that because that's who was actually doing it in Chicago, the people that were certified substance abuse counselors. And they learned the protocol. We trained them, and then they did the clients, which worked out fine because that's where it should have been in the first place. Because that's where the treatment was established. And then Mike, when I was in New York with him, that's who. Like back in the day, that's where it was. But because of whatever circumstances, it got changed. And I don't really think it's because of the full body people didn't want it, but and maybe they are scared, but they get trained at their school if they ask for it. Because I know they get it in Chicago at a couple of the acupuncture schools.
At the acupuncture schools, right? They
Yeah.
get trained in the 5 needle protocol, but they don't do the full NADA training. So it's
Yeah,
different,
that's right. But
and that
the
is
person,
different.
and they actually, when I was in school, they weren't too interested in the ear because they were so busy trying to learn all the points and all that. But so the ear was secondary to most of the students. And
Mhm.
really, they didn't even actually introduce the ear until years later. But now they know it exists, but it's still, they don't actually use the ear that much. They're so into the body. So
Right.
as far as as far as practice, but in the Illinois, with it not being legal, you still have to be in a program with the doctor, a medical doctor of some sort. Then you can actually do the protocol because the doctor just signs off on it. Doctor don't even have to be there, but as long as they sign off on it and they're involved in whatever you do, you can still do it. Because
Right.
now you got protection. And so Illinois is holding us at bay. And my way of getting around that is with me training the doctors and the nurses, which I have been doing.
That's right.
Then I take them with me when I go somewhere. Well, they want to go anyway in the community. And then when they get there, they get a big cultural experience because they don't come outside of their domains in those hospitals unless they get opportunity. And they want to practice it outside where they learned it. And when they get in the community, not only do they learn whatever that cultural experience is, but then the people that they meet also get awful lot from it, because now we got a medical doctor giving them the ear treatment, but they're not inside a clinic or anything. They're at their wherever place that we are at in the community.
Right.
And I've experienced that a lot. And they take to it really well because the treatment works. And it works right away on quite a few people because they so bad off until it works right away. And with all the anguish, anxiety, and everything that's going on now, they get a real, really, the treatment just jumps in to play right away as soon as they get those points. And so a lot of times the place where we are asks us to come, but the doctor legitimizes it.
Right.
Now getting paid, now a lot of that is volunteer, and sometimes they will want to pay you because the doctor's there. But if you were there by yourself, you probably wouldn't get paid.
Right.
Maybe, you know what I'm saying?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for those observations, and thank you for holding up the work at Lincoln and the way that it was they didn't call them peer recovery specialists then. Anybody know what they called them? Comrades, I think, or members of the collective, right?
Yeah. Oh, you talking about then?
At Lincoln, yeah, right. They didn't call them peer recovery specialists, but the members of the collective that provided the acupuncture were people who had come through the program. And
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, those people sort of disappeared, and the
Well,
organization became more medicalized. I mean, the treatment became more medicalized.
well,
And
in Chicago, we were still doing it in the hospitals because we had contracts, myself and the two other people. One of the guys was a full body acupuncturist, and he learned about the ill when he met us. And then there was Arthur, who was administrator at the hospital. And we wound up training all the nurses in the hospital. And then we moved from one hospital to the other. So we had a whole slew of nurses that got trained. And then they were able to do the people that were inpatients at their hospital. Then they would come over to the outpatient unit, and then, we would meet them there. And then we would give them the treatment there. And that's how we wound up in the jail. We were all over the place. It's
Right.
where at least we're in fact in Chicago. But now you got to find somebody that's going to be an advocate. So my advocates are all inside hospitals, and they're all medical doctors. And a lot of them are eager to come out in the community.
Yep. Thank you so much, Francine. Nobi, I don't know if you're active on the call, but I know that you work with members of many different cultural groups, and I was wondering if you had a thought about peer providers in those respects.
I have not worked with the peer support group. It would be great to have somebody like that when we are planning on having the drop-in place, and it's vital to have peer counselors available.
Nobi, when you train, don't you train with Indigenous persons in Arizona?
Phyllis and I train people on the reservation, Navajo reservation. We have done that.
And so isn't that a sort of peer provider, right? Because it's in the same cultural group?
They're in the same on the same reservation, same group, but they are not necessarily peer counselors.
I see what you're saying.
There's a IT, the person, the people who work in the Indian Health Service, all in all sorts of different background. So
Sure. Professional categories, yeah.
Right.
Okay. Great. Well, I just thought I would ask, because I know up in Michigan they train peers in the tribal health system.
Oh, they do, huh? Before, when I was there, they didn't do that. Well, we wasn't that involved, though. I just didn't make it there. But after I left, what's that guy's name that's up there?
Robert
Bob?
Storer, Bob.
Yeah, Bob took my place because I was there for like 5 years in Michigan. But I was in Flint, Detroit, and all of those places with Maryland. It's Maryland originally brought everybody to Michigan. You know Maryland?
Marilyn Miller?
Yeah, she's the one that initiated that treatment in Michigan in the first place. And that's how I wound up there. And I was there for about 5 years. And all the people that got trained were counselors in different places.
Not peers. Okay. Well,
I
thank you.
guess they didn't have a name like that then. This is a new name, huh? Is
Yeah.
this a new title?
It's like 10 years old, wouldn't you say, Kat? About 10 years?
So I would
Oh.
say it depends. So coming from Arizona, right? Arizona, we were called PSSs, peer support specialists. And that had been going on for well before I got trained in 2008. Here in Virginia, we call them peer recovery specialists. Same thing, different title, right? So some states will call them peer mentors, peer coaches, recovery coaches. It kind of varies from state to state.
But AA and NA have always been a peer support service, right? That's the
Well,
premise.
The whole point is fellowship is one peer helping, the power of one peer helping another. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of the original peer support, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question or a comment? All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming this busy month, coming in and spending some time with your Nada family. Kat, I really, really appreciate you bearing the burden of this entire program. And next month, we will return the program to the 4th Wednesday of the month. Because of the hurricane, we got off schedule. And if celebrations are in your future this month, I hope they're all joyous. Otherwise, I will look forward to seeing you all on January 25th. And if you have ideas for programs for the monthly Community Connection Hour, I'd love to talk to Julia when she gets back from Europe. Just email me at membership@accudetox.com. I monitor that. I also have another one that's victoria.taylor@accudetox.com, or find my personal email through the trainer list. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with me. And I look forward to talking with you all on another time. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
So Victoria, where are you located?
I'm in Southwest Virginia, not quite as rurally as Kat, but pretty rurally.
Oh, there was a lady that when we had that meeting in Virginia, in Michigan, when Sarah was still around, she had those various meetings at different places
Mhm.
we were in Michigan, and there was a lady there from West Virginia, and she was trying to get the law passed at that time.
Was that artist?
Artist, that's her name. Yeah, is she
Mhm.
still around?
Yeah, we've done a lot of trainings together.
Oh
Artist.
yeah, because when she came, they were about to okay the law. They were about to, so it got passed. That's been a while now.
Yeah.
So you guys real busy there.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's a great trainer.
Yeah, she worked hard on that law.
She worked hard on that law. And Barbara Weiner.
And
also.
Barbara Weiner, yeah, that's right. Tell her I said hello.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I text with her quite often.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good meeting,
Thank you.
Virginia.
Thank you. My name's Victoria, though.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. It happens
She
all
was,
the
she
time.
was, so you guys were talking about Michigan so much, and then I was thinking, yeah, my trainer up there was Virginia June, and then but anyway, I apologize, but anyway.
I do have a little music for y'all to go out to.
Sure.
It's Randy Newman's singing "You Got a Friend in Me." I thought that'd be fun, like peer support system, right?
You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old past said. For you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me.
You got a friend in me. Oh, you got a friend in me. You got troubles and I got them too. But there isn't anything that I wouldn't do for you. We stick together and can see it through, 'cause you got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me.
Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am.
Maybe bigger and stronger too.
Maybe, but none of them could ever love you the way I do.
Oh, it's me and you, boy.
And as the years go by,
Well, our friendship will never die.
you're gonna see it's our destiny. You got a friend in me.
And you got a friend in me.
Yeah, you got a friend in me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good December.
Thank you.
That
Happy
was great. Good
holidays.
night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank
Have a
you.
good Christmas.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.